We've got a big show tonight. Paul Rieckhoff is here from Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Paul's here live and in person. You may remember earlier this week here on this show, we were first to report on the sketchiness of the supposed veterans fundraiser that Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump did on that decommissioned battleship earlier this week. Specifically, we were first to report that the group Donald Trump was raising money for that night did not actually appear to be a group of veterans. Our initial reporting on that has now been followed up by the Associated Press, by CNN, by local media where this veterans group is headquartered in South Dakota. And over the course of this week, that story has gotten sort of deeper and deeper and worse and worse. It is starting to turn into what I think is a legitimate scandal for the fairly bulletproof campaign of the Republican presidential frontrunner. But for the first time tonight, we've actually obtained from the Trump campaign their explanation of what they thought they were doing on that battleship and who they thought they were raising money for and where the money went. They have not previously explained that all this week as this story has unfolded, but tonight they have given us their explanation. It is fairly amazing. And that is ahead. We're going to be talking about that and other veterans issues with Paul Rieckhoff. I'm very much looking forward to that. But before we get to that conversation, frankly, the news has been breaking fast and weird all day long today. There's a lot of it to get to just because I'm not sure you will have heard all of these stories, and any number of them could end up being important in the long run. A lot of it is on the surface important. A lot of it mostly seems important to me right now because it's just so strange. And we're going to have to start with a very strange story in politics that you have probably not heard today, in part because it's out of Vermont. Vermont, not exactly a swing state. It's not really seen as part of Battleground 2016. But, you know, every place in the country is starting to get polls now in the presidential race, in part because the presidential race is in such chaos. So, since polls are being done everywhere, a new presidential poll has just been done in Vermont. The results are not at all what you would expect. First of all, Jeb Bush does pretty well. I mean, for Jeb Bush right now, getting 6% is a pretty good result. Doing better than Jeb, though, is Scott Walker. And that must be really nice for the Scott Walker campaign because he could use some good news right now. He's bottoming out everywhere now, including nationally, including in Iowa, where he really needs to do well. In the great state of Vermont, at least, Scott Walker is doing better than Jeb Bush. He's at 8% in Vermont. Above Jeb Bush and Scott Walker, though, there is a three-way tie for first place among Republican voters in that state. So it's Jeb in fifth place, Scott Walker in fourth place, and then three candidates are tied for first place for the Republican nomination for president. And those three candidates are Ben Carson, Donald Trump, and Bernie Sanders. This is the Republican vote. I mean, among Democratic voters in his home state, Bernie Sanders has a 51-point lead over Hillary Clinton. But he's in first place on the Republican side, too. He's at least tied for first on the Republican side. And I know everybody's a hero in his own hometown, but that is a freaking transcendently weird poll result. Right? Bernie Sanders tied for first for the Republican nomination for president. Pinch me. But that is not even the weirdest political news today. I hereby submit that this is even weirder, and I swear this is a thing that I did not make up. Rand Paul's national political director now says he is pressing criminal charges against Marco Rubio's deputy campaign manager because he says Marco Rubio's deputy national campaign manager punched him in the face in a bar fight in Michigan last night. Yes, before you ask, there is surveillance camera video of the not very impressive punch. It's not exactly, down goes Frazier or anything, but the guy who got punched, Rand Paul's national political director, who's also his chief strategist in the state of Michigan, he is not taking this lightly. After the punch was thrown, he got on Facebook and wrote this, quote, Marco Rubio's national campaign manager, he meant deputy campaign manager, literally physically assaulted me by punching me in the face. National Journal now reports that same guy, the punchee, he also, last night, after the fight, emailed Marco Rubio's national campaign manager to tell him what had just happened. At 12:51 a.m., he sent this email to Marco Rubio's campaign manager, quote, hey, man, you better wake up. Beeson, who is Rich Beeson, Marco Rubio's deputy campaign manager, the guy who he says threw the punch, Beeson punched me in the face. cops involved. 6 minutes later, at 12:57 a.m., he got a response from Marco Rubio's campaign manager, quote, "Well, if you were talking bleep, I'm glad he did. Besides, we need more space, and we want to take over your townhouse when Rand is done." Oh. The following morning, this morning, Marco Rubio's campaign manager apparently had second thoughts about that initial response. The National Journal reports that he spent another email to the same guy, to the punchee, saying, quote, I assumed you were kidding when you sent this last night. Guess I was wrong. Sorry, I didn't realize it was a real situation. Local police are apparently now investigating this bar fight. Rand Paul's political director says he does want to press charges. The local prosecutor will have to decide if criminal charges are going to be brought against Marco Rubio's deputy national campaign manager. But this is now a thing between the Marco Rubio for president campaign and the Rand Paul for president campaign. This guy who got punched from the Rand Paul campaign is publicly calling on Marco Rubio to fire his deputy campaign manager over this rather pitiful altercation. I told you today's news was weird. The reason these two charming young men were in that bar in Michigan on Mackinac Island last night is because this weekend is one of these Republican presidential candidate cattle calls, where all the candidates are expected to show up and give speeches. Interestingly, although Marco Rubio apparently sent his deputy campaign manager up there, and his deputy campaign manager was fired up enough to allegedly be throwing punches in a bar at political rivals, Marco Rubio himself is not due to speak at this Michigan event. Rand Paul is, though. Rand Paul has the Plum closing keynote speaking spot tomorrow night. It has been reported that Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker used to also have a really good Plum speaking spot at this Michigan event this weekend, but he moved it to an early morning breakfast speech tomorrow instead, so he could make more time in his campaign schedule to be in Iowa. Scott Walker's candidacy, as I mentioned earlier, really does seem to be sort of falling off a cliff now after another forgettable debate performance by Governor Walker after continued bad numbers in the polls. Governor Walker made a really interesting admission to MSNBC's Casey Hunt about how his campaign is having to change course now and what they see as their last lifeline for trying to keep his presidential hopes afloat.
Do you feel like you need to take any additional steps to get your campaign back where it needs to be? Do you need to shake up your staff? Do you need to make any changes in how your campaign's being run?
Biggest thing for us is getting back to the basics, getting into Iowa in the early states. But really, we announced the other day 99 county chairs. We're going to be organized by the precinct.
So it's Iowa or bust for you?
Well, I think we're putting all our eggs in a basket of Iowa. We're committed to Iowa.
We're putting all our eggs in a basket of Iowa. I would love a basket of Iowa. Strategically, though, that's the sort of thing that you usually let other people say about you, right? You let sort of pundits say, oh, Scott Walker better do well in Iowa or he's toast. You don't usually say it about yourself because then you really get yourself in a box, right? I mean, if for some reason you don't do well in Iowa and you've just told the press, yeah, all my eggs are in that basket, well, then it's going to be really hard to explain why you're going to keep going at that point. I mean, if that is in fact where all your proverbial eggs are, then if Scott Walker does poorly in Iowa, he's basically saying now publicly there won't even be a New Hampshire for him. That'll be it. That's not the sort of situation you want to get yourself into strategically, but Scott Walker has not been the most disciplined talker on this campaign. Currently, for the record, regardless of where his eggs are, Scott Walker is polling at an average of less than 5% in Iowa. And so if he's admitting that he has to win there or that's it, that is not a good place for him to be, and that is not a good strategy for him to be admitting. Scott Walker's not the only one, though. A lot of people are struggling right now. It made for some more weird news today. Rick Santorum right now is polling at less than 2% in Iowa, even though he won Iowa in 2012. Rick Santorum is at the point, especially after he also made no hay at the kids' table debate on Wednesday night. He's at the point where he knows he needs to be reassuring people that he's not dropping out of the race. Rick Santorum today, to that end, I think, sent out a big, splashy press announcement about some totally uninteresting, non-notable campaign hires. I mean, this is basically Rick Santorum getting up on his tiptoes and saying, not dead, not dead. Jeb Bush is supposed to be top of the heap at this point in the race, but he is also struggling in his own way. After mixed reviews on his debate performance Wednesday night, the Jeb Bush presidential campaign announced that their candidate would be holding a rally, a Jeb Bush for President rally. Not a town hall, not a speech, not a meet and greet, but a rally for him in Las Vegas, Nevada. This was the turnout for his big rally. which just has to be, has to be demoralizing for the candidate, if nothing else, right? Mr. Bush did try to put as much of a happy face as he could on it.
I appreciate you coming out. A 3 o'clock afternoon. There's other things that are going on. I saw that the schools are emptying out with the kids and that there's a lot of activities here. You could be doing other things.
Most people were doing other things, but a handful of them did go out to see Jeb Bush. They shouldn't have called it a rally. Republican candidates also did another big cattle call today in South Carolina. A 6-hour-long marathon event put on by a conservative activist group called Heritage Action. Forgive the Donald Trump phrasing, but it was a mostly low-energy affair. I think that was in part because the candidates were not allowed to be on stage with each other at the same time. They just had to go one after the other separately. For some candidates, though, that suits them. Ben Carson is one of the mellower candidates in any event, in any format. He got a nice surprise today when the crowd at this event in South Carolina decided to sing to him. They sang very badly, but they meant well, and it was very nice of them. And then, looking happier than I think he ever has on the campaign trail, Ben Carson responded by making a funny. Ben Carson doesn't usually do this, but today he was all lit up. Pew, pew, pew.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here on my birthday. And what a great birthday present. Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, thank you. I guess the best birthday present is I heard Donald Trump had dropped out. Oh, wait a minute. That was just for today. Nah, just kidding. Actually,
Donald Trump did drop out of the race today, just for today. He was supposed to speak at that same South Carolina event where Ben Carson was having the time of his life. But Donald Trump's campaign said, very close to the time he was supposed to be there, that actually he wouldn't be appearing. He had an unforeseen business transaction, which was kind of a strange announcement. NBC's Katie Tur notes today that this is actually the third time this week that Donald Trump has canceled a previously planned something on the campaign trail. Mr. Trump also had a press availability, a Q&A with reporters that was scheduled in conjunction with his speech Monday night in Dallas. He canceled that. He had another press availability scheduled in conjunction with his ill-fated fake veterans group fundraiser on the decommissioned battleship on Tuesday night. He also ended up canceling that event with reporters. And now today, this late announcement that he was canceling today's appearance in South Carolina. And so there was a lot of speculation today on what exactly is going on with Donald Trump and why he pulled out so late from this South Carolina event, which, again, wasn't just a media event. This was supposed to be in front of an audience in the state that goes third in the country, South Carolina. So the speculation today that the reason Donald Trump got yanked off the campaign trail today, the reason that he decided not to show up, was because of the bad reaction to the incident at his New Hampshire town hall last night in which a questioner told Mr. Trump that President Obama is a Muslim and that President Obama was not born in America. And Mr. Trump, in fielding that question, did nothing to push back on those comments at all. Mr. Trump was criticized pretty aggressively for that all day today. He was criticized by all of the Democratic candidates for president. He was criticized by a couple of the Republican candidates for president. Chris Christie and Lindsey Graham both went after Donald Trump on how he handled that. Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, went after Mr. Trump from the White House press room podium at length today on that subject. So there's all this criticism of how that went. That led to all these headlines today that maybe the reason Donald Trump was pulling back off the campaign trail and not showing up in South Carolina was that he was so stung by all this criticism. I tend to think that Donald Trump is more like one of those bacteria that eats radiation. You know what I mean? Like, the idea that he'd be stung or hurt by criticism. Criticism is the thing that gives him his life energy. It's what he lives for. I mean, getting scolded at length by the White House from the White House press room briefing. I mean, are you kidding? The White House spokesman talking about him for a long time. People saying that he's a bad guy and giving all these reasons why. I mean, that's like Christmas and Hanukkah and Tooth Fairy Day all in one for a guy like Donald Trump. It's hard for me to believe that he's pulling back because he's been stung by criticism. I hereby posit that the reason Donald Trump might be pulling back today is because he's pooped. He's tired.
What woman would you like to see on the $10 bill? Mr. Trump.
Well, because she's been sitting for 3 hours, I think my daughter Ivanka, who's right here.
What have you learned after tonight?
Well, I've learned that I have no trouble standing for 3 hours. And, you know, that's, I mean, literally, it must be a record. I hope that the audience is okay with it, because I actually think it's a little bit too long. The one complaint would be it was a long debate. You know, to be 3 hours, it's got to be a record. So I would say the one thing is it was very, very long, 3 hours. It was a very long debate. Can you believe this? That debate was 3 hours. It felt like more than that.
I think he's pooped. I think running for president is hard. I think maybe he just needed a day off. But the news did get just weird today, Trump and otherwise. Mr. Trump is due to appear, I kid you not, at a high school homecoming dance tomorrow in Urbandale, Iowa. We'll see if his business transaction is completed in time for him to make it. This is in response to a Twitter campaign run by the students of that high school under the hashtag Presidance, as in President, come to our dance. They're getting Donald Trump to come speak to them tomorrow before they dance. Mr. Trump's own high school, the military-themed prep school he went to in the 1960s, which he says made him feel like he was in the military, even though he wasn't. That high school has just gone bankrupt and has been put up for sale. There was an ad for people who might want to buy it this week in the New York Times. You can buy Donald Trump's high school this week if you want to. Minimum bid, $9.5 million. Okay. Want to get weirder? There was also that weird story earlier this summer where one of the super PACs supporting Ted Cruz inexplicably gave $500,000 to a group supporting Carly Fiorina. We couldn't understand at the time why one campaign would be funding another campaign. Well, now it turns out in that very strange story, the FEC is investigating that expenditure. Yeah, you know, today I didn't think anything could be weirder than Bernie Sanders being tied for first place in the race for the Republican nomination for president in one state. But almost everything else that happened in politics today was as weird as that or even weirder. Which is kind of awesome. Today, the news gods were a little drunk.